Welcome to Travel in 20, your weekly passport to travelling like a pro. I'm Jacqui and each week I'll be joined by travel insiders to uncover their top tips in just 20 minutes. This episode is brought to you in partnership with Tourism Western Australia. Today on Travel in 20, we head west. I'm joined by Fleur Bainger, a Perth-based journalist who knows WA like the back of her hand and will share some of her favourite itineraries to inspire your next Western Australian escape. Welcome to Travel in 20, Fleur.
Oh, it's so good to be here.
It's such a pleasure. I want to start by getting you to describe what it is about WA as a whole that makes it so unique.
I think it's really the scale of it and how much diversity is packed into this state that represents about a third of Australia. You know, if you go from the very top where it's got the red, rich soil that gets under your fingernails and into your veins and all of those amazing rock formations that are some of the oldest on the planet. And then you come down the coastline and there is the world's largest fringing reef, which you can access just off the sand. You come down further, there's Perth, which is bustling, and we've got quokkas over on Rottnest Island making everyone swoon. And then further south, there's these tall tree forests with wineries on either side and just so much beauty that you want to pinch yourself. So it's quite an extraordinary state when it comes to diversity.
So for those of us over on the East Coast, it is of course so varied and so different. But if I'm to fly to WA and I'm heading to Perth, what is my first impression going to be?
Well, when you come out of the Perth airport, it's never pretty. Like most airports, it's not the best view. However, if you can hold on to your expectations until you reach the coastline. I've been here nearly 20 years and I still can't get over it. Every time I drive over a rise and out on the other side as you head into Cottesloe Beach is this extraordinary expanse of sparkling blue. And if you get there at the right time with the sun in the right spot, it cuts through the water, so it's almost like glass. And every time it gets me. It's so beautiful. The beaches really are, I hate to brag, but they're really other level over on the West Coast.
Because we're all very jealous over here on the East Coast, and your weather too, coming from Victoria, mostly jealous of that beautiful WA weather.
Yes, I was in Melbourne recently and I was reminded of the whole 4 seasons in one day thing, and Perth does not have that. You don't need to bring an umbrella most of the time.
Okay, well, there is plenty to love about Perth, and let's start with the accommodation. I want to get your recommendations for those of us who maybe haven't been before or haven't been in a while, because you have some magnificent places to stay.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people don't realise that we've got the hotel that was twice voted number 2 best hotel in the world by Condé Nast Traveller, and if there's any excuse to stay there, I think that that's a good one. It's called Como the Treasury, and it's only 48 rooms. It's in a historic building which marks point zero of Western Australia. So when all the buildings were first built over 100 years ago, they had, you know, the postal building and all the government buildings and this spot from where all the different measurements to different places were taken, and that's point zero, and this hotel is on that site. So it's a really special place to stay, and it also has an amazing fancy pants restaurant on the top level, and then it's got a really cool Thai eatery in the basement in very sort of atmospheric surrounds with all this beautiful arches and things, and it's got a beer hall, which of course it would, because the people behind it were the guys that started Little Creatures Brewery in Fremantle, which is quite iconic now. And if you like what they do, they also started another new hotel called Alex Hotel, which is in Northbridge, and Northbridge is the suburb that's butted up against Perth CBD, and the CBD is quite shiny and fancy, whereas Northbridge is more of that gritty underbelly kind of, you know, but quite fun and interesting and a bit eclectic. And depending on which street you're on, you know, it could either be tiny little small bars with fairy lights everywhere and dance halls and those sorts of things. An Alex Hotel, it's in the place you want to be. Let's just say that.
Okay, well, that is a very good inside tip and exactly what I need to know. Now, when we think Perth, we think quokkas. And it is absolutely at the very top of my children's bucket list to one day go and get a selfie with a quokka. But you've got a really good tip in terms of spending the night on Rottnest Island.
Well, most people don't realise that these cute, smiley little fuzzballs that we all love, and even, you know, I must have been over to Roto at least 15 times and I still take photos of them, but they are nocturnal. And so people don't realise that the ones that are out during the day, they're kind of like, they're the cute little seagull versions of the quokkas who like to, see people and pick up any scraps. Whereas the ones that come out at night are the ones that are a bit more in tune with their natural habitat and the way that they're meant to live. And so if you stay overnight at Rottnest and you walk, say, from, the pub up to your accommodation, maybe you're staying out at Geordie Beach, which to me is the most spectacular white sand beach there is on Rottnest, and they have 63 beaches, so there's a lot. But if you walk along the bike path, because there's no cars on Rottnest, at night the quokkas are bouncing around like basketballs. They're just everywhere and they're in the trees, and it's so cute. And the kids delight in it because it's a surprise, and they're quite, they're relaxed around people, but they are still wild creatures. And my kids just think it's like Christmas when these quokkas are everywhere at night time.
And in terms of accommodation options there for the family, there are a few on Rottnest?
Yeah, look, it sort of all depends what you like, whether you want to go high-end at the new Samphire Resort, which now has a heated pool, which is much more enjoyable than the non-heated version it had before. That's the newest accommodation on Rotto, and it is very glam, and it's right in the centre of the settlement, so it's very easy just to walk everywhere or grab a bike. Most people just put on their thongs and grab a bike and ride around the island. All ages do that. It's quite lovely. Whereas probably I think it would be a 15-minute odd walk out of the settlement is Geordie Bay, and that is the place that I like to stay. It's a bit quieter, and they have older cottages that are part of the, not original but near original buildings that were put on Rottnest, and my family loves that because you can stay literally on the beachfront. All you have is ocean view, and you walk down the steps and you're on the sand, and it's where a lot of the yachts also moor up, and so you get this confetti of yacht looking out at you in the evening, and you have a sunset over that bay, and it's just magical.
What a wonderful tip. I'm so glad that I know that now. So once we've done our Rotto trip, we need to head down to Margaret River. I've been a few times. I absolutely love it, not just for the quality of the produce and the wonderful wine that you have, but the natural landscape of Margaret River is like nothing else.
It really is, because people think wine and they kind of know a bit about the tall tree forest. The kari trees rise up 60 odd metres, and they're really quite spectacular because they are white trunked, and there's, a section of forest called Boronut Forest that has dozens of them. It's like toothpicks just coming out of the earth, and that is really breathtaking. I always recommend people drive there. It's about 10 or 20 minutes south of Margaret River Town, and most people don't go past Margaret River Town, so they don't realise it's there. But as well as the forest, there's these cliffs, and you can do abseiling down them if you want to, and then these beautiful rock formations in the water, and there are certain spots along the coastline where the surf is broken by these rocks, and you can imagine all the waves just fizz over the top, like a lemonade or something, and there are natural spas that people know about, and you can go down to those and just sit in the water and have this water fizz over your shoulders. Injured Up Natural Spa is probably my favourite. It is getting a bit better known now, so you have to go early or late to...
You've got to go soon, Fleur.
Yeah, you've got to avoid the influencers who are taking all their beautiful photos there, and also go on a smaller swell rather than a big one, because otherwise the waves, it's definitely white water that comes through as opposed to little effervescent bubbles.
You're giving us a wonderful list of insider tips today. I think I want to focus as a wine lover on some of the wineries, the must-visit wineries, because there are some iconic Australian wines that come out of the Margaret River region.
Yeah, there really are, and if you like Chardonnay like I do, that's my favourite, then Margaret River is just your absolute mecca. It's also really amazing for Cab Sav, but lately there's been a lot more new wave kind of winemakers playing with natural wine and all the different varieties that you don't see as much. But if you're talking about the icon wineries, you really must go to Cullen. And Cullen is interesting because it has this huge reputation, and it's very polished, and the wine is exceptional and quite expensive, and deservedly so. But when you get there, it's kind of this really approachable, very welcoming, sort of not hoity-toity, fancy-pantsy kind of place. And you go in and it's like having this wonderful kitchen kind of restaurant where it's all very relaxed, and you can sit outside under the peppermint trees in the wonderful shade, and they've got picnic tables which are not fancy, but the food is exceptional. And then as you look out over the vines, you notice that there's this interesting looking garden off to the left, and it's coiled like a shell. And it turns out that Cullen is obviously into biodynamics and organics and all that sort of thing. They've been biodynamic for years and years, and I think it's one of the reasons their wine has such clarity to it. But they have this permaculture garden that they constructed a few years ago because they wanted to teach people how it all works and how different plants work together. And so you can wander in this sort of circular shape and see the permaculture garden with lots of info in it. And I just love that it's so approachable because it's not what you expect from a very high-profile winery, this very grassrootsy, approachable feel. And it's the same in a way at Vas Felix, which is just around the corner from there because a lot of them are clustered in this one particular part of Margaret River called Williabrup. Vas Felix is, again, a bit more grand, but it has this outdoor sculpture collection because the Holmescourt family own it.
Yes, I've been there. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, and Janet is obviously very into her art. So, yeah, amazing art through there. And they have the secret cellar door down below the winery, which you can do special tastings in. So it's something that you've got to, I think, pre-arrange, but you can have these very special experiences sometimes with the winemaker as well, and I've done that, and that's really fun. And then the other place I'd tip off for you is Voyager, another well-known winery. You go there and it's got this really looming Cape Dutch style architecture, very white. And then they have a really extensive garden, heaps and heaps of roses everywhere. And tucked in around the back is a kitchen garden. And you can go there and smell the smells and, crunch up the leaves and the herbs. And, they've even encouraged me to take a zucchini once, which was fun. So again, fancy place, but very approachable. And then you get to enjoy the wine on top of all that.
I have done all three of those wineries, Fleur, and I remember them well and consider them to be some of the most beautiful places we've ever visited. I did want to get this tip from you, though, because back when I went, there was no direct flight, but there is now a direct flight from Melbourne to Busselton, which I think is really good to tell our listeners if they are coming from Melbourne.
Oh, absolutely. It makes it so easy. So Busselton is kind of one of the major towns in the region of Margaret River. It's up the northern end, and so you can fly in there. And Busselton used to be somewhere that had a really pretty beach, and then you'd kind of move on and go to the wineries and everything else. But Busselton has evolved probably in the last maybe 2-3 years into this really interesting, thriving foodie kind of hub. So it's got this great new brewery called Shelter Brewery, which is right on the foreshore. It overlooks this stunning turquoise water, which, like, most WA beaches, unbelievably clear and white sand. And it looks over this enormous long jetty, which is 1.8 kilometres. I think it's the longest jetty in the Southern Hemisphere. You can take a train down it if you don't want to walk. But they're redoing the underwater observatory at the moment, I think. And so you can go to the end of the jetty and then go down and see all the sea life, which is really interesting because we have this thing called the Lewin Current that runs along the coastline. It's a warming current and it goes in a different direction to most other currents, and it enables the sea life to be partially tropical. It's sort of like a crossover region where you get temperate and tropical fish and corals and all sorts of things. So that's really worth doing. On top of that, there's this cute little restaurant called Alberta's where the former head chef of Noma in Copenhagen, he happened to, hook up with a girl from Margaret River who happened to run the kitchen garden at Noma, and they've opened their own little place in Margaret River in Busselton. And so again, doing really interesting stuff, more simple than what they do at Noma, and not necessarily what you'd always expect. It definitely challenges the locals a little bit sometimes, but people overall really love it. And so they're just two things. There's a whole lot.
I love that. A little taste of the world's best restaurant in Busselton. Now let's head north a little bit to Ningaloo Reef, which again I think is one of those Australian landmarks that is on everyone's bucket list to one day visit.
Oh, it's got to be done. I think if you've done the Barrier Reef, you need to come to Ningaloo because the Barrier Reef is beautiful, it has lots of colour and all that sort of thing, but it also has a 2-hour boat ride that you have to endure to get to it. The thing about Ningaloo Reef is, apart from its size, being, I think, the longest fringing reef in the world and a World Heritage listed area, you can literally just walk off the beach and you're really close to it. It doesn't take long to swim out to it all. And so suddenly you've got all this coral, this fish, and all this sea life. And on top of that, everyone would know that the whale sharks come to visit Ningaloo. So they have known for a long time that it's very special. Took us a bit longer to wake up to. But these extraordinary, very safe, very friendly fish with 300 tiny wincy little teeth. They only eat krill, so don't worry. But swimming with one of those, I mean, people talk about it being completely life-changing. And so if you go to Ningaloo, obviously you have to do that. And I like to tell people that it is kind of a little bit different than what you might expect, because it is this wondrous experience once you're in the water swimming with one, but getting into the water when they spot one is this really frantic experience where it's like, go, quick, put on your, flippers, get in there. And you're like, oh my God, all right. It's not this dreamy, slow thing that just, you plunge in and suddenly float next to a whale shark. It's frantic. And then they swim quite fast, so you've got to keep up with them. But in that moment when it's coming towards you with this enormous, wide vacuum cleaner-like mouth, and you're kind of struck and almost go into like, rabbit in the headlights kind of experience, it is just unbelievable. And so, yeah, you've got to do that on Ningaloo Reef.
Oh, it is top of my bucket list. I've said that a lot over this podcast series, but to see a whale shark and to have that experience, I think, as you said, would be absolutely life-changing. And I did want to touch on the Kimberley as well, because such a beautiful region. And if we are coming to WA, it would be remiss of us not to visit there.
The Kimberley is probably my favourite part in all of WA. I try and get there every year, and there's always expensive things that you can do, and the Kimberley has plenty of those because it's very far-flung, remote, these places that you want to get to, typically out of the way. However, you can still do it in a really affordable way. And so just, I think it was in August, I was up there last with my 2 kids, and I hired a 4-wheel drive on my own, which I think is, very empowering. And now that the road that heads from Broome north up to the Dampier Peninsula, it's fully paved. That happened during COVID. It was a $65 million project. That road had never been fully paved before. It was deeply corrugated, red earth. It felt like your teeth were going to fall out if you were driving it. It was awful. And that's why people would pay $800 to fly up to the end of it. So now you can drive up there in 2 to 2.5 hours. It's very doable. You can even go on a 2-wheel drive so long as you're not going far off the main road, because obviously the side roads are not paved. But you can reach some Aboriginal communities are 2 to 3 k's off that road, and they're open now for people to come and visit. There's a new camping ability called Camping with Custodians, and there'll be a new campsite that opens up in May at Lombardina community, where they have a lot of the pearl shell carving artists who are quite world renowned and yet little known within Australia. There's also a really amazing family-owned pearl farm where, again, it's 2 to 3 k's off the main road. It's quite well graded, so you can do that in a 2-wheel drive. And they have really beautiful new safari tents, so you can stay there and have air conditioning, which is, again, a very big luxury for the Kimberley when you're out far-flung like that. And they have these tours. There's one that I did recently with an Aboriginal woman. It's quite new. She takes you across these giant tides, because they have some of the largest tropical tides in the world in the Kimberley. They rise and fall by up to 10 to 13 metres. So if you imagine like a 2 or 3 story building, that's how far the water goes up and down every single day with the tides, and that's what makes it perfect for growing pearls. But Aboriginal people who lived out on the islands out in the Buccaneer Archipelago, they used to create mangrove rafts, and they would ride these tides into the mainland to trade and to collect things and do ceremony, all that sort of stuff, and then they'd ride them back out again. And so this descendant, this wonderful woman, she now takes people out, obviously in a boat, but you get to see that firsthand, and it really is marvellous.
Fleur, what a beautiful picture you've painted of WA. I don't think I could have a favourite spot, because I would like to visit all of them. And do you think that's the main takeaway about WA, is that there's just so much to do there, not just for couples but also for families and if you're on your own?
Yeah, there's so much to do. It will, it sort of light you up no matter which bit you choose. But I think it's always good to know, what do you love? If you love snorkeling, go to Ningaloo. If you get really high on extraordinary rock formations and age and wonder and quiet, go to the Kimberley. If you love wine and nature, go to Margaret River. WA is somewhere that you can cut into sections in a way and visit multiple times. Don't try and do it all unless you're going to spend, a serious amount of time over here, because it is big and you don't want to wear yourself out. Come and do those special, wonderful bites.
Fleur, wonderful to chat, and thank you for giving us that beautiful insight into WA. I'll definitely be back.
Well, look me up and I will take you out and show you all the good places. I'd love to do that.
Will do. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Thanks for listening. Experience more of the world's best holiday destinations with luxury escapes, with more inclusions, more value and more expertise. Find and book everything you need, from hotels and resorts to flights, tours, cruises and experiences. Stay up to date with other episodes of Travel in 20 on Spotify, Apple or wherever you get your podcasts. And visit luxuryescapes.com to get more from your next holiday.